Hi, my name is Jenelle Riley. I'm an editor at Variety, and I'm so excited to be here today for this SAG-AFTRA Foundation Conversation at Home with Watchmen. Please join me in welcoming two members of this flawless ensemble, Tim Blake Nelson and Jean Smart. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Our pleasure.
Our pleasure.
Reunited. This is as close as I'm going to get to a season 2 for a while, I feel.
Yes, well, anytime I can be between you and Jean Smart on a screen, I'm very excited.
When was the last time we saw each other in the flesh? Was that?
I think it might have been at the Claremont Lounge in Atlanta.
Oh my God. Okay, well.
How long ago was that?
That was our last night on Watchmen.
Was that a year and a half?
Really?
Was that a year? We almost connected. He was in LA accepting an award, but we missed each other.
Yes.
Well, this is primarily an audience of SAG actors who watch this, so I actually like to start by asking, how did you get your SAG card?
Jean?
I should know this. I know how I got my Actors Equity card. Played Mrs. Cratchit in A Christmas Carol. My SAG card. Well, I guess it was, maybe it was the first series I did, which was called Teachers Only with Lynn Redgrave.
Really? You went straight to a series, not like commercials or guest stars?
No. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Well, let's say it was Teachers Only. Why not?
Yeah, I think it was. Because I was living in New York. And I got an audition for this TV show, and they flew me out to LA, and I got the part, and then I just stayed. So.
And never left, or you're in LA now?
Well, I mean, I've gone back to New York a couple of times and done theater and things, but no, been here for a long time.
And Tim, for you?
I got my SAG card on Nora Ephron's first movie, This Is My Life.
That's cool.
Playing a babysitter to Julie Kavner's kids. Two wonderful young actors who I think each is still acting. Gabby Hoffman and
I know that name.
And Samantha Fox.
Wow. Well, that's
and I think they had their SAG cards before I had mine, and they were, I think, 11 and 7 at the time. And I waited until the ripe old age of 26, and somehow, even though I certainly was auditioning for everything, everywhere, every commercial, every off-Broadway play, every television show, every industrial, but somehow Nora Ephron cast me based on a meeting. There was no audition. We just sat in a hotel room talking about this part she wanted to put in her movie. She and Laura Rosenthal and I. It was not a casting couch situation, particularly not with Nora Ephron, one of the most amazing people I ever met. And she said, well, I want you to be in this movie and we'll figure out what the part is, but you seem like you're in the right ballpark for what I want. And then she figured out the part based on that.
That's cool.
A little misleading. The next 8 years were not like that.
That's amazing. I actually want to go back and start at the beginning with Watchmen, the graphic novel, which, like, I think so many people, I'm such a huge fan of. I know it was published in 1986 and 1987, was a huge seminal work, spawned a previous film. Were either of you familiar with this iteration of the story when the series came your way?
I was not. No, I had never even heard of it. So, I mean, somehow I missed that. I have a 30-year-old son, but he, I guess, was not into those comic books. So I missed the whole thing.
I guess I was the opposite. Although you wouldn't know it from our performances because Jean is so amazing. It looks like she had was familiar with the aesthetic terms of Watchmen since she was a 12-year-old girl. She's so amazing in the show. I have 3 very nerdy sons, and I'm something of that myself. And so we were quite familiar with the original Watchmen and also the Zack Snyder movie in this house. And I had no idea, however, that HBO, let alone Damon Lindelof, was going to take it on. When it came into my house and I saw the title of this show, Watchmen, and nobody had warned me about it. It was just, this has been sent to you by Damon Lindelof and Tom Spezialy, and they'd like you to consider the role of Looking Glass. And I thought, wait, is this actually Watchmen? And then that unfolded into the temerity of Damon Lindelof imagining a future for the show, not just retelling the graphic novel, and doing it in a way that was so coherent and true. I think for all of us, and Gene can certainly speak to this too, once you read what was on the page, it didn't need to have an antecedent. You just wanted to be a part of it regardless.
Yeah, no, I couldn't say no when they sent me the script, and Damon, I'm sure you probably know this, Jenelle, but Damon had been asked to do Watchmen before, and he had turned it down a couple of times. It was so iconic to him and so important to him and growing up and everything that he just felt like, no, I don't want to touch it. I can't. And I think the 3rd time he got offered it, he thought, dang, if I don't do it, somebody else is going to do it, and that will kill me. So he thought about it long and hard and said yes, and just put everything he had into that first season, and just he came up with the most amazing world to still honor the original material and make it something completely new and relevant, and it just was astonishing.
When you guys signed on, how much of the story did you have? I don't know if you only had the first script, which, Laurie doesn't even appear until episode 3, and Wade's story takes a little time for us to get to know him. So what did you know about the characters going in?
I was told some pretty outlandish stuff about my character and why he was who he was, why he had joined the police department in the first place. And it was really out there in the extremes in terms of a backstory. And it informed what I did over the first 4 episodes in a very profound way, just because I'd been told this. I'm not, that was Damon. I mean, he and the director of the first episode, Nicole Casal, had said, look, this is in his past, and this is an animating episode in his life. And boy, was it one. It affected him deeply, profoundly, down to the way he dressed. And I went along for the first episodes assuming that was what was going to be revealed in what I was told would be a Wade-centric episode, which ended up being episode 5. And then during episode 4, I was informed, well, that's no longer true. And we have something different in store for you. But because Damon and his writers are so sensitive and so attuned to what their actors are doing, and I'm talking about Regina and Andrew Howard and Gene and Jeremy, all of us, even though they changed it pretty dramatically, they didn't change it spiritually. And so what they did end up writing, which is that as a 15-year-old boy, he'd experienced the Squid Attack in New York City from New Jersey, associated with a weird sexual encounter. In a strange way, nothing I'd done in terms of the choices that I've made as an actor contravened any of that. it all still made sense. So I didn't feel double-crossed. In a sense, I almost felt enriched because the new story or backstory that they chose to reveal, even though it wasn't as extravagant or dramatic, made more sense for the whole story, and I would even dare say for my character and me, and it felt more natural to play the scenes they were writing in the present. And that was a real learning experience for me in terms of what sorts of choices you make as an actor, how they can be impacted by writers, and also how actors can be sensitized, or no, writers can be sensitized to what actors are doing in a very constructive way. And so I owe a great deal of thanks to Damon and his writers for that change.
I'm trying to imagine a more dramatic backstory for him.
I would reveal it, but if Damon ever wants to reveal what it was, I'll leave that to him. But it was pretty extreme.
Wow.
Do I know this story?
No.
I can't believe you didn't tell me that night at the Claremont Lounge.
I will tell you privately. I'll tell you.
Right. Well, that's the thing about doing a series, which is kind of a conundrum sometimes for actors, is that, when you're doing a movie, you read the entire thing, so you know the beginning, middle, and the end, and you try not to play the ending that you already know. So there's an advantage in doing a series sometimes because, like life, you don't know what's in store for you every minute of the day even. But at the same time, as an actor, you want to be as specific as you can in your character development. You want as much detail and specificity and in your relationships and everything with the other characters. But then there's always that danger at the beginning of marrying yourself to something that later you think, oh no, why did I establish that? That doesn't work at all. That's not helping me at all. So there's this weird feeling, at least in the beginning, where you trying to feel everything out, but at the same time trying to be specific. And that's the hard part of it. I was fortunate because they sent me the episode 3, Laurie's first episode, and it was so complete, unlike a lot of episodes where you just get a piece of the character, and another episode you get another piece of their life and things like that. It was almost like a little movie. It was we saw so much of her. It told me so much about her. And I only had a few days, so they gave me a crash course in Watchmen. I went out with one of the writers for martinis, and she told me about Laurie's family and her parents and her relationships, and gave me as much as she could, because a very, very, very famous actress had turned the part down, which was why I didn't have much time to prepare. They handed me the book and told me some info and said, get on the plane. So
I think I read in an interview with you that when you got to the end of that episode and you saw what was in Laurie's briefcase, you were sort of like not sure how to react.
Oh man,
to that.
yeah. I mean, because I'm reading this script. I remember I was in my living room and I'm reading the script and thinking, this is fabulous. I love this character. I just love. Oh Jesus, no, God. It's like, oh please, no.
And then she offered to supply her own prop, which was really.
And, you said you would never tell.
What's
wrong
said,
with
no, you? The production designer has that covered.
Anyway, when I spoke to Damon on the phone, we chatted a little bit, and I hadn't met him yet, and I said, we talked for a while, and then I said, okay, we have to talk about the big blue elephant in the room, and how is this going to figure into her daily existence? He goes, oh no, don't worry. It's just, apparently one of the female writers suggested it kind of as a joke in the writer's room, and Damon went, yeah, why not? I like it. And so he presented it to her as a gift after we wrapped.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, it actually is very poetic. It speaks to Laurie's loneliness, I think, and that she is holding on to the past in a lot of ways. It's funny how like actual articles, think pieces have been written about this prop.
Yeah, looks, yeah. It's a little scary to me when I look at it. It's a little scary, but no,
Apparently
obviously
there's a whole chapter about it in the John Bolton book.
What?
Really? I don't know if you're kidding or not. I'd believe it. I would
John
believe
Bolton
it.
was the Trump's national security advisor.
That John Bolton.
He's about to publish a tell-all book.
That's amazing.
No, it is. It's sad. She's a sad character. She's a sad, lonesome person.
I think most of the characters in Watchmen are, sadly, and might be one of the reasons we love them. But you guys both, I was thinking about this, you've both found yourself in part of amazing ensembles in so many of your works over the years. And this is no exception. This ensemble is flawless, and you all work so well together. You both get to share scenes, not only with each other, but the legendary Regina King. It must have been, it must have been great, like coming to set every day and looking at the call sheet and seeing another great actor that you get to work with.
I think part of the experience of part of the responsibility, rather, of a showrunner or on a movie, a director, is to assemble people who are going to get along with one another as collaborators. And certainly sometimes that's not the case, and the product is still extraordinary. The results are extraordinary. So maybe sometimes getting along is overrated. I don't think so. I like to get along. But this was one of those projects in which there was a great deal of mutual respect. And I remember Regina King turning to me one day and remarking on that. And she said, "You want to know why it is, Tim?" And I said, "Why?" And she volunteered this. It wasn't, she said, "You want to know why we get along?" She just said out of the blue. So, well, she said, "It's because we're all experienced adults on this show. And every single one of us has been doing it for a long time, and none of us had success immediately." And she was right about that. And Damon really did cast a room full of adults who'd been, each of us, at it for a while. I remember my first day meeting Gene, and I was just sitting quietly in my chair waiting for our first scene to start, and Gene...
Yeah, scribbling in your diary.
Yeah, scribbling in my journal. And I would look up every now and then and just watch Gene dealing with everyone, and I just knew immediately, okay, she belongs on this set that Regina had described to me in terms of the similarities among the actors and the attitudes of the actors. I thought they chose the right person. She's treating everybody really well. There's no assumption of status. She's just easy with everyone and going out of her way not to make people's lives difficult. And I would say that was pretty much a feature of most of the actors. Oh no, all of the actors that Damon chose. But that goes back to Damon.
Well, also too, I think most of us started in the theater, and I remember a casting director telling me one time that she could tell immediately actors who were theater trained and actors who were not. And part of it also is an attitude about the work, because in the theater, you depend on each other so much. You're all in the same you're all in the same boat. When you're out there on stage, you better, you need to trust your fellow actors implicitly. And there's no kind of pecking order. There's no, who has a bigger dressing room or who's, this or that, or, I mean, it's, the writer is sort of, and the material is the most, but there's just not that kind of it's a completely different atmosphere. It's you need each other so much, and it's hard. I mean, every night you're telling the same story over and over and over and over, and and you need to be with people who feel the same way about the material and get excited when you start to hear the audience coming in and you think, okay, now I get to tell the story again to people, maybe most people who have never heard it before. And that's what makes it fun. You think, okay, now this group of 100 people or 1,000 people or whatever the size of the theater that haven't heard this cool story that we're doing, And I do think there's a completely different attitude when you come from the theater. Do you agree, Tim?
I do, and also, first and foremost, you have to love acting to do theater, because you're not paid much. It's evanescent. So when the show's over, that's it. And people who didn't see it can't see it. The audiences for the really good material aren't actually that big. It's usually, you're lucky if it's 250 people off Broadway. Yeah. And that's where most theater actors act, unless they're doing musicals. And you've just got to love it. So there aren't all these other voices and reasons in your head and in your ear. And so I think actors who did train in theater and come up through theater are much more appreciative of being on sets, on movie sets and television sets, where there are all the perks and blandishments, and none of it is taken for granted.
It's true.
It's so interesting to me because I would watch Watchmen every week, and I would think it's the sci-fi story with what might on the page seem like outlandish elements. It's raining squid and there's superheroes. At the same time, especially in today's climate, it feels so real and grounded and timely. I mean, I'm curious if it was timely when you read it, or sometimes you make something and when it comes out, you feel like you were ahead of the curve in some ways.
Jean, you want to answer that first?
Well, I remember the first thing that struck me was the fact that Damon had set the story against this horrific incident in Tulsa, Oklahoma back in 1920 of the Tulsa race massacre. It goes by different names. It's called Black Wall Street. It's called Greenwood. But the fact that I had never heard of it, growing up in Seattle, Washington, it was not taught in any of the schools. My father was a U.S. history teacher. I had never heard of that event. I think people were stunned when they found out that it was true and it wasn't exaggerated at all. So, and also too, then there's that theme of the Squid Attack, which was so much like 9/11. We would comment on that and that sort of twisted philosophy that Jeremy's character had of creating a common enemy to bring the world together. It would be sort of like if there was any kind of an alien attack or something, people would stop the theory that they would stop their squabbling among themselves and that we would all as human beings have a common enemy. And the fact that Damon, and I was speaking to him about this recently, it was so prescient. This, first of all, the theme of wearing masks, and then the issue of police brutality. I mean, it's kind of stunning that he wrote that a couple of years ago, and it's all kind of very timely, beyond timely right now. Because we do have, the coronavirus became our common enemy, and now it's set, this strange quarantine Roland is set against the backdrop of these horrific events. Did that make any sense?
Yeah.
Yes. No, it was eerie to watch it unfold from week to week. And Tim, you're doing some amazing acting behind a mask, which is, I mean, they teach classes on mask acting, so it's not
exactly.
like, yeah, but, you're taking away an actor's tool in so many ways, and yet you know everything that's going on underneath.
Yeah, I had a curious experience with that. I've talked about it elsewhere, so anybody who's watching this who might have heard me yammer on about it, my apologies ahead of time. But I certainly did, as a part of 4 years of actor training, do a lot of mask work. And generally what mask work does, by taking away your face, your eyes, your expression, and all that information that you have to use, and particularly in response to people, because so much of acting is about how you're responding to your partner and sending energy back to your partner, not what you're generating just by yourself. That's actually when acting is usually the most uninteresting. But you're depending on your face as a part of that. And so in mask class, what you learn to do is inevitably is to compensate. And so you end up with more voice, you end up with more words, because mask class is usually improvisation based. And you end up using your body in a more amplified, sometimes exaggerated way. And usually masked teachers throw really extreme situations at you because, of course, the tradition of masks goes back to Greek tragedy. And so the class itself is really interested in extremes, like you slept with your mother and didn't know.
I hate when that happens.
And what I found on Watchmen was that the reverse ended up being true, that suddenly having the mask, and perhaps this is a function of our modern ways of communicating, but having the mask actually gave me more power. I just suddenly, with it on, and also knowing that it was not opaque but reflective, which is something beyond opaque, and implicating the viewer with the viewer's own image, or the scene partner, that I actually felt so empowered that I had to do less. I needed fewer words, and this is a guy who doesn't speak unless it's absolutely necessary in terms of the way it was written by Damon and the writers. And I didn't really want to use my body much because I already had status. And almost the less I gave in terms of volume and amplitude and of movement, the more natural it felt. And so, very much to my surprise, after a career of playing outlandishly stupid or talkative or extravagant characters, I was suddenly getting to play someone far more subtle than I've ever been able to do, because it just hasn't often been called for in the way that I've been cast with a face like this. And so I loved it. It was just a great surprise to get to do less instead of having to do more, which is what I imagined was going to be the case.
It was so impressive to me. My first scene with Tim, the day we met, was the scene in the, well, she called it the racist detector. It was your what was it called? The interrogation pod?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was so impressed with him because of what he just said, was that here he's completely covered in this shiny mask, and he's so subtle. And I thought, this guy is an actor's actor. He's amazing. I mean, I would say something because Lori's just trying to bait him. She just loves messing with people. She's picking her teeth in his mask and looking at herself and stuff. And he would just sort of move his head that much or something, but I'd ask him something that he didn't want to answer. I mean, it was so small and it was so perfect and it spoke volumes. It was so much fun. It was great.
Are you prepared to see people dressed as you for Halloween? Because I think we're going to see a lot of looking glasses this year if we have a Halloween.
Yeah, I saw a little bit of that. I saw a little bit of that this past Halloween, and just as long as it's none of my children, I'm good with it.
I think, well, if we see anybody, it'll probably be a lot of Regina, Angela's character, because oh my God, was that the coolest costume ever?
Yeah, fantastic.
Wow.
Cool.
Yeah.
Actually, I saw some people at the protest yesterday. They had, coronavirus masks, but they were Rorschach and Looking Glass.
Oh, really?
Oh my gosh, really?
Cool.
Wow.
I wish I'd gotten a picture.
Oh, yes. I'd like to see that.
Yeah, my son Eli has been wearing, he got one of the yellow police masks, and he's been using that to go outside.
Oh, wow.
In New York City. And yeah, of course, as Jean pointed out, that's another way that you can't really call it prescient on Damon's part because he didn't know there was going to be a coronavirus. But I will say that I think he's one of those people who has great antennae out there for what is not only afflicting the culture, but might be coming our way. And you certainly can look at the coronavirus, and I don't believe this is a stretch, as akin to the virus of fear that pervades Watchmen, and that is the reason for the masks.
Yeah.
Well, I loved Watchmen so much, I've actually gone back and started watching his other series, The Leftovers, and that is eerie to be watching during this time.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the director of the pilot directed a lot of those.
That's right.
Oh, that's right. She did.
Yeah.
I could talk for hours. I'm sorry, I could listen for hours, I should say. But I know we have to go, and I just sort of want to ask everyone during this time. First of all, I want to tell the viewers, you can look in the comments for information on SAG-AFTRA Foundation's COVID-19 Relief Fund. But what is sort of occupying your time, while we're all sort of waiting to get back outside? I'm trying to get Tim to play us a concert because we can see his guitars in the back. But are there shows you're watching or things you're reading? What are you sort of doing right now?
Well, I'm in total Virgo mode, and I'm cleaning out all my closets. And I've been doing a lot of gardening. I've got my vegetables going, and I'm just happy as a clam doing that. So it's kind of, I just at first was so, it was starting to get to me, but I mean, at first I was just very preoccupied with gardening and enjoying not having to get on an airplane and fly somewhere twice a week and things like that. But no, I've been enjoying and reappreciating my home and my yard and just trying to make everything cozy, trying to fix my nest.
I would say similar. We have 3 boys here, so my wife and I and our boys have spent an enormous amount of time together, and there's been a lot of collective, mainly my wife and I, doing a lot of cleaning, and I've been involved without going into too much detail, and Jean participated as well in getting actors to say thank you to frontline workers, which is a project with which I was lucky enough to be involved at an early stage, and people like Jean have joined in, and it's been has been helpful to feel like there's something that we can do, because the nature of this virus is that other than donating money, which I think a lot of us have done, if you actually go and try to help on the front lines, mostly you're just going to be in the way, or you're going to potentially to be spreading the virus. And that's been tricky. So it's been lucky to have a way of being involved in a quiet and hopefully unpretentious way.
I was glad you asked me to do that.
And then a huge amount of reading. And then I'm weirdly, on Monday, going off to shoot a movie, which is why I have this ludicrous beard.
Somebody said to me about, where the heck are you shooting a movie?
We're shooting in Arkansas, and it's a movie called Ghosts of the Ozarks, made by these eccentric young filmmakers from Arkansas, Jordan Long, Tara Perry, and Matt Glass. Young filmmakers. It's a high concept horror film along the lines of Get Out or Midsommar. And it's just very oddly suited for this time because it's about a walled-in community. And so it's effectively a self-quarantined set. And they've been able to get a hotel that'll be dedicated just to the cast and crew. And they have coronavirus tests. They were able to get their financier to put in extra money for COVID, for virus and antibody tests for on an ad hoc basis whenever anybody shows symptoms. And I was supposed to be doing this movie in May, and they pushed it into June and put in these COVID protocols, and I'm going to shoot. Pre-production is going on right now. We start shooting on the 15th.
Wow, you're doing scenes with other actors?
Yeah.
I mean, you're not just...
And we have tests. You know, everybody's going to be tested, quarantined. Everybody's tested the day they land. So it's all on the up and up. SAG is okay with it. The state of Arkansas is okay with it. And they're following federal protocols. And they have a COVID tracer ombudsman on set just dedicated to that, in addition to the medic.
This might be
how it goes.
Sorry, Jenelle.
Well, I was just going to say, this might be the way of the future. This might be, how we make things for the next few months.
Well, the testing is the issue. You've got to have the testing. Although they say the tests are so flawed, that's a little bit.
This is the 15-minute test that was tested at Harvard and ruled the most effective of the 14 they tested. And it's apparently, although this seems impossible, got a 100% accuracy rate. And it's a pinprick, and it gives you the results in 15 minutes. It sounds too good to be true, but again, these producers have been very exhaustive and careful and caring. And so I'm pretty optimistic. And one of my sons, I can't go without talking about my sons. My oldest son, Henry, is going to come crew on the movie. So I trust that.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. That's fantastic. Okay, but my question is, so once you're there, though, you have to stay. It's not like you can come home and go back and forth.
Correct, but I prefer to do that anyway. And I mean, it's not a drop and pick up situation.
I can't do that.
The question is, because we're actors, but not just the actors, anybody who works on a movie, no matter the department, the grip department, the sparks, the makeup and hair, script supervision, all of it. We are social people.
Yeah.
That's why we do it, because of the fizz of getting to be around people. I always like to say that on a movie set or a television show set, you're generally around a group of people who wouldn't want to be anywhere else than on that set doing what they're doing. It's kind of what's remarkable about being on sets. It's one of my favorite aspects of it. You really can look around, and I don't think this is some Panglossian view of it. I really think this is true. You look around and you see in the lighting department, or you see in the in camera department or in the makeup trailer, people are just infused with purpose and self-value like no other place. It's what they've wanted to do. They love movies. They love television. And here they are in the crucible of making it. And so we're ebullient with one another. We hug and we talk, and everybody talks with everybody. And that's what I worry about most as I go off to do this movie, is whether I and everyone else will have the self-control and the discipline that you see manifested on the street in New York City with social distancing, which has been remarkable to go out and actually see an entire polyglot city of people from all different races, ethnicities, and socioeconomic strata playing by the same rules, by and large, in terms of walking down the sidewalk. I'm just, I do worry about that on a movie set, but we'll see.
Well, I want to remind everyone that you can actually see all the episodes of Watchmen now available on HBO. Please check it out. Give it a second watch if you haven't, because you'll pick up entirely new things. I want to thank you guys so much for joining us today, and thank you all for watching at home.
Thank you, Jenelle.
Thanks, Jenelle. Thanks, Gene.
Sam.